So I wanted to show an example of a short game that I'd played on the map using my green-white mana ram deck. My opponent was red-green aggro, stuff like Call of the Herd, Curd Ape, etc. So I knew I'd need some pretty serious defense to sweep. I was on the play, so I was really glad to see that we were starting on the Aloran Wilds. Even if I couldn't lock him out with a quick Chaos Strike, my mana acceleration would get me more out of the mana flare than it would for him. And so I basically kept my hand because it contained an Oracle of Maldaya. If I could run that out on turn 2, I could play another land immediately and basically go crazy. Once the mulligans were finished, the surrounding plains were revealed, and they were a bit of a mixed blessing. Agrium could be a saving grace if he came out swinging, but Otaria or Imasturm could be a nightmare of extra turns, extra damage, and I really didn't want to take a gamble on the extra turns helping me to stabilize. Turns out my opponent didn't like that risk either, so on turn 3 he tromped us straight into the Academy at Teleria West, apparently planning to leverage his lower curve, dump his hand out, and then refill for free. If I lost my hand at the same time, trying to get out of there, hey, even better. Now, normally it's a bad idea to give a beatdown player a bunch of extra cards, but the Academy didn't really hurt me otherwise, and I had the Hippodrome and the Sanctum nearby to sort of help contain his forces or recover if they built up too much. So we were both willing to sort of sit tight for a while. I took some damage, he got to draw a new hand, but in the meantime I got to ramp up to Chorus of the Conclave, and then I had a bunch of extra mana to basically swing us straight into the Hippodrome. My plan was that once we were there, his dudes would be small, vulnerable, and ineffective, and my large dudes that still had some power would be safe. An unexpected consequence of this plan, though, was the arrival of Nar Isle on the horizon. Before I could pick off any of his dudes, he kept us rolling straight into the land of spires and fires, as it were, and suddenly my life total was a serious liability. So I took a few hits before I managed to escape from Nar Isle, at which point I decided I wanted to put as much ground as possible between me and the hotspot. Two of the adjacent planes were as yet unknown, so I could Hellride in either direction, but Glimmer Void could also mean a forked lightning bolt pointed straight at my head, so that's bad news. Neither Leth Lake nor Isle of Vesuva were really a problem, so I rode in the other direction, and the extra speed from the Hellride meant that 4 planes immediately sort of eclipsed from view. Ironically, and I guess the landscape of the Bland Eternities being strange as it is, one of those lands immediately came back into view. We'd arrived back at the Aloran Wilds. Normally this kind of strange wraparound effect can happen. It's unusual, but it usually comes into play one step away. Hell riding, as I said, is kind of like traveling extra fast for one step, and it can make some strange things happen. So, as it turns out, the neighboring planes were both really relevant. I could go defensive, but rather than turtle in the Celestine Reef, I decided I was going to go on the offense and try and use the extra mana from the wilds. My opponent basically played out a bunch of threats, swung with some of them, and I managed to weather that attack. Had a exile in my hand, so the math was a little bit off for him. It saved me, and then I get to untap, play a land, float 16 mana before rolling the die and trying to walk away. I had enough spare mana after my plan to roll the die 4 times, which gives me a little bit over 50% chance of making it to Sokenzen, which I did, which is great. Once I was there, I had 10 mana left, a little bit of Ogre Battle Magic to help out, and I could summon a giant horde of 3 5/5 Hasty Angels, which could swing straight across the board and smash face. So the game ended pretty dramatically, but it was a lot of fun. And it was a good example, I think, of some of the interesting things that can happen on the map, how you can plan a little bit better, and you still get that sort of crazy, wacky chaos effect going on that you do from Planechase, but it's not quite so merciless in its chaos.